Hey everyone, happy Friday. We made it. TGIF. I'm here with the Boston legend Scott Kiersner. So much to talk about. And I see we're wearing our Friday best, Scott, aren't we?
You and I both got the casual Friday memo when we were in our closets this morning, clearly.
Every day is casual Friday these days, but this is our season. This is our time of the year in Boston.
I
So
know.
we like to
Everybody
take
suddenly feels like
advantage of it.
summery or like they're going on a Hawaiian cruise or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for those two people who actually don't know who Scott Kirshner is, and your many different extracurricular activities, maybe introduce yourself and a little bit about your biography. Not sure everyone knows about your career.
Yeah, maybe not on your vastly global streaming audience, Evan, but I do wear a couple different hats. One of the newest things is co-founding this nonprofit called the Innovation Trail, which is trying to kind of tell the story of innovation in Massachusetts in a way that tourists and visitors and conference attendees can experience it. And thanks for showing the video of that. We can talk more if you want. I write a weekly column for the Boston Globe covering startups and venture capital. In the past, I've been a contributor to Wired and Fast Company in the New York Times, writing about emerging technologies. And my main focus is I run a media and events company called InnoLead, which looks at research and development, innovation, corporate venture capital, basically anything happening inside a big established company that is oriented around driving future growth.
Wow, there's so much there. I'm not sure when you sleep, but I'm sure you do. So where are we with the innovation economy, specifically in and around Boston and beyond? You've been focused on this for, gosh, decades. Um, is it the best of times? Are we in a really challenging time, particularly in tech? What say you?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a reset year in tech. I got a Slack message this morning from somebody who works at SVB and was part of the SVB layoffs. Everybody, I think, thinks that SVB died, a sudden death in March, but that wasn't the case, and they got acquired. And I think they're still trying to run it as a bank, but there's also continuing layoffs at SVB and lots of tech companies here in Boston and elsewhere. I mean, I think it's funny you said, is it like the best of times or the worst of times? It is totally a tale of two tech economies.
Mm,
And when you talk to venture capitalists right now, when you talk to people inside big companies, we just ran an InnoLead event here in Boston last week about AI. The two economies are there is AI and there is everything else in tech. And everything else in tech is struggling. There's going to be down rounds and revaluations. I got a text message from a friend literally within the last hour saying, "Hey, let's get together for coffee. I need to find a new job."
mm.
Got laid off from my job in tech. Um, but in AI, the venture capitalists are funding new stuff. There's companies getting created. Many of them are still at very early seed stages, sub 5 people building the product. And so I do think things are much brighter if you're an AI or generative AI company right now.
Absolutely. I'd love to talk about your adoption of and view of some of the tools. But you meet so many inspiring entrepreneurs and innovators in Boston and beyond. Any particular entrepreneurs or startups come to mind? Anyone really moving things forward in the innovation economy, or are there too many to name in one
No,
discussion?
it's like my memory is too short. And I mean, I think also the other issue in Boston, which is makes it kind of unique and different from New York and different from San Francisco, right? Is we have this biotech economy
Mm,
and so much money. I mean, when you talk about new funding rounds, you touch this world a fair amount, right? Like when you talk about 100 million plus funding rounds that are happening in Boston right now, it's biotech companies that are like
mm.
big swing, ambitious, let's get science out of the lab and into a startup type of thing. I mean, I was visiting with a startup that's, spun out of Ginkgo Bioworks and is thinking about all kinds of new like skincare products and consumer products
Wow.
um, using biotech, right? And trying to understand like, hey, there's lots of bacteria that live on our skin. How could you start to influence that colony of
Wow.
bacteria that live on top of us using biotech techniques. And then there's just other cool stuff that I've been following. I just wrote about the Spotify office in Boston, which was a
Hmm.
result of them acquiring a startup a couple of years ago called the Echo Nest. And that was a startup that was all about personalizing music and understanding different genres of music in a data oriented way. Spotify bought it pre COVID, and now it's the group that just developed this really interesting AI feature in Spotify, the AI DJ, which I don't know if you've played with yet, but it's really
I've
cool.
not.
Yeah.
I am going
Yes.
to get on that Friday night. I'll be there with my AI DJ. So
Yeah.
this is just fascinating because you create and curate such amazing content and stories. How do you select, what stories, what ideas you think might provide the most value to your readers, listeners?
I mean, I think it's so idiosyncratic that I feel
Hmm.
like I never can offer great advice about, in general, about like how do you connect with all kinds of journalists. I mean, for me, so much of it is about like running into people in person. And I just feel like I'm so glad that there are in person events again, just because you get a sense of like people mention stuff offhandedly. Like, I joke that, cocktail parties are a great way to meet people because, they're a little bit looser than when you go to visit them in a conference room at their company, right? And the whole PR team is there at the table with them. So people will share maybe some information that, um, just is a little bit juicier. I don't want to mention like too much stuff that I'm working on in the future, but like, I don't know. One example is like, I was at a conference a bunch of years ago that Endeca put on in
Mm.
Boston. And I think I was just sitting with one of the co-founders of Endeca, and he happened to mention that they had an employee. They eventually got acquired by Oracle, for $1 billion. And then a bunch of the founders went on to create Toast and other startup
Mm.
companies that are still growing now. But at Endeca, just sitting at a breakfast, sitting next to one of their co-founders, and he mentioned they had an employee who would kayak into work. He would kayak from his house to Brookline into Kendall Square. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a really interesting story, right? It's not about the Endeca product or their next
Right.
funding round or who they're hiring as SVP of marketing. It's like, wow, this guy has a pretty amazing exercise routine that is his morning commute. Like, first of all, the biggest exercise was carrying the kayak to the river. Um, so I don't know. I guess I tend to get story ideas in person when you hear people say offhanded, interesting stuff, because I'm not a journalist who wants to cover, version 2.3 of somebody's product,
That's
you know,
my job. Not that
or
I'm a
right. Yeah. I
journalist, but
mean,
yeah.
God bless you and other people who do that, where I don't, it's less interesting for me to cover the company's D round. I would rather write about them before they're seed funded or, as they're getting seed funding. And I like seeing a lot of first demos. And so to me, like having somebody who reaches out and is like, as example, like, oh, we have this new smoothie machine that we invented in Boston, and our beta unit is at an office in downtown Boston. Do you want to come and have a smoothie from our new smoothie vending machine? Like, you know, that's
A
up my alley.
classic. That
Yeah.
is very Bostonian.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, I mean, you covered this ecosystem and innovation in and around Boston for so long. I mean, what do you think other places, other cities globally can learn from this city and around fostering innovation, entrepreneurship? What are some of the lessons that you suggest they look at?
I mean, I'd be curious what you think about this or if you think I'm missing anything, but like, one of the things is you really just need the foundational, like, great university or two
Mm.
that attracts lots of smart people. And like, those are the crown jewels. And I forget which governor of Massachusetts, if it was Deval Patrick or Charlie Baker or maybe someone before then, came up with this line. But like, the secret to an innovation economy or a great startup ecosystem is start a university and then wait a few hundred years. Like Harvard was initially not great. Like I think the first class of Harvard students was like 16 people, and all they were doing was like training ministers, basically, the first couple of years of Harvard, right? So you can't start a university and expect it to change the world overnight. I know there are lots of parts of the world where they have really new universities that they're excited about. I went to see one in Istanbul a couple of years ago where they're like,
Mm.
"Hey, we just built this whole new business school and isn't it amazing?" It's like university plus time. And then I also think just like consistent events like I think about how important Venture Cafe is in
Mm,
Cambridge. It happens every Thursday. And so if you have an out of towner that you're hosting, you can bring them by Venture Cafe on a Thursday night. There have been other events in the past, like Web Innovators was a longstanding demo night that they would have in Cambridge. I think those like weekly or monthly, like here's where the entrepreneurs, here's where the investors show up to hang out is also really important to an ecosystem. And I guess the last thing I would say is like governments often try to design this stuff and make it
mm.
happen from above, the thunderbolt of like government will make an innovation economy pop up in city X. And maybe that's worked in Singapore, like that might be the one example where like it was by government design that, Singapore has a lot of entrepreneurship and innovation in it. Even there, I would point out like, is there a world changing software, biotech, AI mobile company that has come out of Singapore?
Yeah, great point.
I can't think of one, but it is like a healthy economy by government design. I just think they're the exception that proves the rule that like most places, wherever it is, Italy, Spain, Turkey, Ghana, like you just can't have the government have the thunderbolt approach to making an innovation economy exist.
Yeah, fantastic point. Although you can have a government make, healthy, safe spaces. I mean, Boston, we have great education, we have great access to healthcare, we have a great, mostly great transportation network, and so it's this place is a great destination to live, to raise a family, and that matters. I think when it comes to company building. Um, what do you, when you do your work at InnoLead, I mean, what are some of the factors that, get overlooked when, trying to foster innovation within their teams? Any tips or tricks to those, either established business leaders or entrepreneurs on shortcutting the innovation process, if that's
Well,
possible?
well, you've worked in small companies and big companies, right? I think that's true of
Yeah, I
your.
worked with small companies. I was at Acme Packet and earlier companies. Yeah, I always like the two pizza team. If you could, according to Bezos, if your team, your core team is can't be fed with two pizzas, it's too big. So small
Yeah.
teams, decentralized teams, but that doesn't really scale. So, and you deal with big companies. What are they seeing and saying about their innovation practices?
Well, I guess I would say the biggest thing is that they're just under resourced.
Mm,
Everybody in a startup feels like their job is innovation in some way, right? It's like, hey, we have this new idea. Let's go talk to some early customers. And like sales and marketing will get excited about that. And they'll let you talk to some potential customers. And like the whole lean startup methodology is baked into startups at this point. Um, and I just think in larger companies, they trip over their shoelaces in so many ways when it comes
mm.
to innovation, not just when they acquire startups and then kind of squash them often and drive away the employees. But when they create these innovation groups, and it's like, hey, we brought together 5 people in an innovation lab, and they're going to change this giant 50,000 person company, like whatever it is, whether it's General Mills, General Motors, General Electric, all the generals, like have had this issue, right? And these companies are just way too big to have a handful of innovation people in a year or two do anything.
Mm,
And I just think there's a fundamental difference. There's like, I oversimplify everything. In large companies, there's two kinds of companies. There's one kind that just does innovation in this innovation theater, episodic, 5 people
mm.
in a room. It's not even the 5 people isn't the 2 pizza team. It's the like 1 pizza team, And that's one kind of company that's just not committed to it. They want to say the
Right.
word innovation a lot. They want the CEO to occasionally talk about an innovation project on the conference call with Wall Street analysts. But then there's the other kind of company, and you would just say, like, oh man, Nike, Starbucks, Disney, Lego. There's a handful of companies where you can go back decades and decades and you can say, in lots of different ways, this is a company that believes that you can't stay still, that you always do have to be thinking about next customer, next frontier. And as example, like Lego, just thinking about them because they're fun to talk about. Um, they know that digital is going to be really important to the future. And they see that kids are spending more time on computers and on phones. And they have taken so many at bats at trying to figure out, like, what is Lego going to represent in the
Mm,
world of gaming, in the world of the metaverse, right? And they haven't yet had the home run there, but like I think they have hit some singles and doubles and triples, and they've had some fly balls, and like that's what innovation takes. And Disney would be another good example. Like, why is Disney Plus successful as a thing? It's because Disney knew that streaming was going to be important and that owning the channel to the home was going to be important, and they were willing to try and fail multiple times at that business.
great insights. Let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the innovation trail. What is it as an organization? And tell us about the format and the day. When are we looking at kickoff?
Well, do you know about the Freedom Trail? Have you ever walked the
The
Freedom
Freedom
Trail?
Trail is a classic. Me and 50 tourists at a time. It gets a little busy in the summer, but it's a wonderful experience if you ever come to Boston.
Yeah. So Freedom Trail is, the top thing, or one of the top few things that people do when they come to Boston, in addition to going to Fenway Park and maybe going to the Museum of Fine Arts. We took the Freedom Trail model and said, okay, the Freedom Trail is this collection of historic sites that are walkable to each other. And it tells the story of like everything that happened in the lead up to the American Revolution. You go to
Mm.
Paul Revere's house and you see Old North Church, and there's a lot of graveyards on the Freedom Trail. You go to Old South Meeting House where they started the Boston Tea Party. So Freedom Trail is awesome. If you haven't been on it, highly recommend. But a bunch of people in the world of STEM and entrepreneurship in Boston said, "Hey, we've been doing stuff in this city since we started the American Revolution. We didn't stop there. It's not a city that's preserved in amber." And so the innovation trail, the idea is basically to give visitors an experience that they can do when they're here. And they might be here for, they're at HubSpot's inbound conference.
Mm.
They're at the bio conference that happens, the big bio trade show that happens in June this year. Maybe they're here for a college visit or a job interview, but like, how do you give them an experience and a window into all this cool stuff that happens in Boston? And, the other thing that makes it really unique is I don't think there's any other city in the world, and I would toss this out, if anyone wants to post a comment and challenge this, there's no other city in the world that has 4 STEM museums within walking distance of each other. So like that makes us especially nerdy, that you can go from the Mass General Museum of Medical History and Innovation. You can go to the Museum of Science. You can go to the MIT Museum, which is amazing. And you can go to this new Broad Discovery Center at the Broad Institute. Those are all the hot pink icons on the screen here, the
Mm.
4 museums. There's even a 5th museum, which is like a top secret museum that's almost never open to the public, that Verizon owns in downtown Boston. It's like a museum of telephone history. And so while we haven't convinced Verizon to regularly open it to the public, we do occasional special events where we get people into this really interesting telephone museum, because the telephone was invented in downtown Boston. I don't know if you knew that.
I did, but I don't think the world really knew that at all. And by the way, this website is fantastic. This is quite a journey in and of itself. So shout out to whoever built the
Yeah, that's a Boston firm
innovationtrail.org.
called Visual Dialogue, and they are such homies that they like, the fonts on the website were all designed in Boston. They just did a great
Oh my
job with the Google
goodness.
Maps API. The maps follow you as you scroll through it.
What a journey. And do people need to sign up, or they just sort of it's a self tour as well? How should people approach it?
Well, there's 2 ways to experience it right now, and a third is coming up. Way number 1 is you can use the website any time of the day or week to guide you from place to
Mm.
place. And as you can see, there's videos, there's some text, there's some questions that you could discuss if you're walking it with kids or you're walking it with a group, some kind of discussion questions for between sites. As I mentioned before, there's 4 museums. You could choose to pop into one of the museums and check out the gift shop or grab a bite to eat, or
Mm.
go into the museum for an hour. So that's sort of the self-guided experience. And then this summer, every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, there's a tour company called Cambridge Historical Tours that runs a 90-minute walking tour of just the Cambridge side. So that's kind of a Kendall Square focused walking tour. And those are going really great. 5 stars on TripAdvisor, 5 stars on Google, and the guides are amazing. Like they're super high energy, and they can explain, the Human Genome Project in a way that even I can understand it. I got very poor grades in high school biology.
Okay. So yeah, it's super exciting. I can't wait to maybe live stream the walk or live tweet the walk. That would be fun. I think our city does, Boston and their state does pretty well when it comes to fostering innovation. What else could they be doing or are they doing I might not be aware of?
Well, there's a new economic development secretary in
Hmm.
Massachusetts who comes from the startup world. This woman, Yvonne Howe.
Hmm.
She was CFO and COO at the startup PillPack that was doing online pharmacy, digital, sort of home delivered prescriptions. They got acquired by Amazon, and Yvonne Howe is now Secretary of Economic Development here. The biggest issue, I think, in Massachusetts is that we've been losing population over the last
Mm.
couple of years during COVID as people have been gravitating towards like warmer states with no
It's just the weather. It's
state income
unbelievable. Yeah,
tax.
just
Yeah. So I just wrote a Globe column about this that I think is going to run the next couple of days, but I really think we need to tell a more compelling story about
mm,
what is Boston about? What are we trying to do here? Like being open to all kinds of entrepreneurs. One of the things that I think is so unique about Boston's DNA is like it's a place that really loves to solve hard problems. And so we don't tend to do the like mobile gold rush, the social gold rush, the Gen AI gold rush thing where like overnight, this is what makes Silicon Valley great. To some extent,
mm.
New York is this kind of ecosystem where like overnight, suddenly everybody pivots and they're like working on a Gen AI company. Um, Boston is really interested in like tough problems. What Katie Ray at the Engine calls tough tech. It's like climate, grid scale batteries. Solving intractable neurological diseases and disorders. You know,
Yeah,
uh,
we're not so big on crypto here. It's not like our
well, I mean,
not
you've
really
got
our thing for
Circle,
good, but
the one of the crypto survivors, Circle, that manages the USDC stablecoin is here in Boston. But
but
yeah, it's
having
like
said that, I think we're not missing out on the AI wave with what's happening at MIT and beyond. I think I'm super excited with all of the excitement and innovation coming out of the Media Lab and more. So there's so much opportunity. Well, I know we're getting to the bottom of the hour. You're a busy man. What are you looking forward to over the next weeks? Summertime, personally, professionally. What's on your agenda?
well, I'm kind of done. I feel like I've been running a bunch of conferences this
Hmm.
spring, and we have a really big InnoLead conference that we're doing in Cambridge in October called Impact. That will be
Wow.
very AI focused, and so we're doing a lot of work on that October 25th to 27th. And this summer is really the experiment of, like I was talking about, these guided walking tours of the innovation trail. Taking this thing that really has been an idea that we beta tested a little bit last summer and doing it in a more regular way, where there's 5 of them a week, and we're trying to get people to go out on them. And yeah, I guess at some point I'll take some time off this summer, but like you, I enjoy being busy and feeling like in the flow of things and knowing what's going on.
Well, thanks for sharing what's going on. Appreciate you and the work you do. And everyone, thanks for watching. Be sure to follow Scott on social and LinkedIn and Twitter, and of course, InnoLead as well. And look forward to updates. Thanks so much, Scott. Have a
Yeah,
great summer.
always good to see you, Evan. Thanks.